The Detroit Pistons once lost 28 games in a row. Not 28 games in a season, not 28 games spread across 2 years. 28 consecutive games. In a row, one after another. Like clockwork, but sadder. It was the longest single-season losing streak in NBA history, and the guy who had to show up and play every single one of those games, the franchise player, the #1 overall pick, the man they were building everything around, was seen walking off the court after loss number 25, fighting back tears in front of 20,000 people. His name is Cade Cunningham. And 2 years later, he just broke LeBron James's playoff record. Same player, same city, same teammates, different everything else. This is that story. And if you're the kind of person who thinks professional athletes are just entertainers who play a kid's game for too much money, stick around. Because what Detroit just did might change your mind. If this is your kind of content, hit subscribe before we go any further. We do this every week. You're going to want to be here for it. Let's make sure we understand exactly what we're talking about. The 2023-24 Detroit Pistons were not just bad. They were historically, cosmically, almost impressively bad. The losing streak started in October 2023 and didn't end until January 2024, 28 games. The previous NBA record, held by the Philadelphia 76ers, who had been deliberately losing games as part of a rebuilding strategy they called the process, was 28 games across 2 seasons. Detroit tied it by accident. And here's what made it worse. The Pistons weren't trying to lose. They genuinely thought they had a chance to compete. Owner Tom Gores said publicly that he expected the team to contend for a play-in spot. That quote aged the way you'd expect. The team finished 1468, not .500. Not a lottery team. 14 wins, 682 games of basketball played, and Detroit won 14 of them. It was the worst season in franchise history, a franchise that includes 3 NBA championships, the legendary Bad Boys era, the 2004 title run, a city with genuine, deep basketball identity, reduced to this. But here's the part that never gets enough attention. At Game 25 of that losing streak, January 5, 2024, the cameras caught Cade Cunningham leaving the court. Head down, jaw tight. The kind of expression you make when you're desperately trying not to cry in public and losing that battle. He was 22 years old. He'd been the #1 overall pick in 2021. He came in with the weight of a city's hopes on his shoulders, and the city was watching him crumble under losses that weren't entirely his fault, but were entirely his problem. Later, reflecting on that moment, Cunningham said something that most people glossed over but deserves to be repeated. "I couldn't have imagined it." This is probably selfish to say. I felt like even as an individual, something like this could never happen to me. I felt like I was so good I couldn't do that. But I realized it takes more than getting your own. It takes more than feeling good about your game. That's not the quote of someone making excuses. That's the quote of someone being cracked open by failure and choosing to learn from it instead of run from it. Most players would have demanded a trade. Cade Cunningham stayed. And that decision, quiet, unglamorous, invisible to most of the basketball world, is the reason we're talking about Detroit right now. After finishing 1468, the Detroit Pistons made a series of moves that generated approximately 0 national headlines. No blockbuster trade, no splashy free agent signing, no desperate lunge at a proven star to paper over the cracks. What they did instead was hire a coach. J.B. Bickerstaff had just been fired by the Cleveland Cavaliers, a team he'd led to the second round of the playoffs, experienced, calm, a reputation for developing young players and building defensive identity. He walked into a Detroit locker room full of talented, wounded, young players who had just lived through the worst season in franchise history. And the first thing he told them, according to people in the room, was not about systems or schemes or rotations. It was about identity. You are not your record, he told them, but you are accountable for what comes next. Simple, direct. The kind of thing a coach says when he understands that the problem isn't talent. The problem is belief. Then they signed Tobias Harris. Harris had just finished a disappointing run with the Philadelphia 76ers, a team that had grown frustrated with his playoff performances and his $36 million salary that always seemed like too much for what he delivered in big moments. Detroit gave him a 2-year, $52 million contract. The reaction from analysts was unanimous: overpay. One national writer called it the kind of signing that makes you wonder if the Pistons are serious about rebuilding. Note that quote. We're coming back to it in Game 7. The rest of the offseason was quiet. No trades that made SportsCenter. No press conferences declaring Detroit a contender. Just a coaching hire, a veteran signing, and a young core. Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Ausar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, Isaiah Stewart, returning to try again. The same players who had lost 28 games in a row, walking back into the same building, deciding that last year didn't define them. That sounds simple. It is not simple. October 2024, new season, new coach, same roster. The Detroit Pistons went on a 13-game winning streak to open the year, tying a franchise record. They led the Eastern Conference, and here's the stat that should stop you cold. The core of that historically bad 2023-24 team, Cunningham, Duren, Thompson, Ivey, Stewart, produced, through the first 30 games of the 2025-26 season, a 24-6 record. 2 years earlier, those same players had produced a 228 record through 30 games. Same people, different outcome. Bickerstaff built one of the most disciplined defensive systems in the NBA around what they already had. Tobias Harris, the overpay, averaged 21.6 points and 8.1 rebounds and played the best basketball of his career at 31 years old. And Cunningham became the engine of everything, averaging 28 points and 9 assists a game. Detroit finished the regular season as the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. 60 wins, 22 losses. The same franchise that had been a punchline in January 2024. But winning the regular season doesn't mean anything in the NBA without the playoffs. And the playoffs had their own plan for the Detroit Pistons. Because nothing in this story was going to be easy. April 2026, first round, Detroit Pistons versus Orlando Magic. 1 seed versus 8 seed. On paper, a formality. On the actual court, anything but. The Pistons lost games 3 and 4 in Orlando. Just like that, the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference was down 3-1 to an 8 seed. The basketball world immediately prepared to write the obituary. Down 3-1. The analysts were measured. The fans were panicking. Social media was doing what social media does, which is catastrophize at the speed of light. And the Cunningham narrative came roaring back. Through 4 games, he had shot 15 of 46 from the field, 17 turnovers. The player who had carried this team all season was disappearing on the biggest stage. It looked, uncomfortably, like January 2024 again. Except for one thing, he had stayed through January 2024. He had lived through it. He knew something about himself now that he didn't know then. And somewhere in the Detroit locker room, J.B. Bickerstaff looked at his team and said something. Whatever it was, it worked. Game 5, April 29th, Detroit. Cade Cunningham had been a ghost for 4 games. He scored 45 points, not just 45 points, a new Detroit Pistons franchise record for points in a playoff game, in a must-win game. After 4 games of being the player everyone was blaming. That performance, the decision to walk into the most important game of your team's season, having played the worst basketball of your playoff life, and respond with the best, is the kind of thing that separates players. Detroit won. Series 3-2, Game 6. May weren't Orlando. The Magic came out hot. By halftime, Orlando led by 24 points. 24 points. The season was, by any reasonable calculation, over. Cade Cunningham scored 24 of his 32 points in the second half. Detroit erased the deficit, won the game, forced a Game 7. The last time the Pistons had overcome a 3-1 deficit in a playoff series was 2003, also against Orlando, also the Magic. History doesn't repeat. But in Detroit, it apparently rhymes. Game 7, May 3, Little Caesars Arena. Detroit. The building was sold out. Isaiah Thomas, who built the Bad Boys, was courtside. Lions players Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown were there. The city showed up. Detroit came out and made it a statement. Cade Cunningham, 32 points, 12 assists, 10 of 18 from the field. Tobias Harris, the guy every analyst called an overpay, scored 30 points, grabbed 9 rebounds, and hit 5 three-pointers after shooting 19% from 3 through the first 6 games. Jalen Duren, 15 points, 15 rebounds, and Dennis Jenkins, a two-way contract player who started the season as the last man on the bench, hit a buzzer-beating three-pointer to end the third quarter, giving Detroit a 19-point lead and sending the arena into a level of noise it hasn't heard in years. Final score? Detroit 116, Orlando 94. Paolo Banchero scored 38 points in the loss. 38 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists. He was extraordinary. He also lost by 22. That's what a healthy, deep team does to individual brilliance. After the game, Cunningham, who had just become the second youngest player in NBA history to record 30 points and 10 assists in a Game 7 behind only Luka Dončić, stood at his locker and said, "Playoff basketball's a lot of fun. So intense, so much on the line. Credit to the Magic. They pushed us, really made us take a look in the mirror. Thankfully, we got out of this. It wasn't the way we would have drawn it up, but we'll take it. And we're going to be better for it." Which is, all things considered, a very calm thing to say for someone who just ended an 18-year drought. Now, because this is a story about basketball and not a bedtime fable, let's be honest about something. The Detroit Pistons still have real problems. When Cunningham struggled in games 1 through 4, shooting under 33% with 17 turnovers, the team had almost nothing behind him. Their offense became incoherent. Their role players disappeared. They are about to face the Cleveland Cavaliers in the second round. The Cavaliers have Donovan Mitchell, one of the most reliable playoff scorers in the league. They have depth. They have experience. If Cade Cunningham goes cold again, if the team can't solve the problem of what to do when their best player is off, this run ends quickly. The story of the Pistons' resilience is real. It's earned. It deserves every word written about it. But resilience is not a strategy. And the Eastern Conference semifinals are not the first round. Detroit has proven it can survive adversity. The next question is whether it can sustain excellence. That answer is coming soon. Here's how this story ends. For now, somewhere in Detroit tonight, there's a kid who was 9 years old when the Pistons started that 28-game losing streak, who watched Cade Cunningham fight back tears on a school night, who maybe cried a little too, because kids do that when their team loses and nobody tells them they shouldn't. That kid just watched the Detroit Pistons win a Game 7. Same players, 2 years. One of the greatest turnaround stories in the history of professional basketball. The NBA is often presented as a league of superstars and super teams, of big markets and bigger contracts, of players who choose their destinations like tourists choosing hotels. Detroit didn't get a super team. Detroit didn't land a free agent superstar. Detroit didn't trade for anyone who was going to save them. Detroit stayed. And staying through the worst season in franchise history, through the tears, through the analytics that said it was over, through the national media that had already moved on, turned out to be enough. Cade Cunningham once said he never imagined losing like that could happen to him. He doesn't have to imagine it anymore. He lived it, and he came out the other side. That's what Detroit does. It always has. Subscribe if this is your kind of story. Drop a like if Detroit just made you feel something. See you for Game 1 of the second round. Screen fades, the sound of a roaring crowd at Little Caesars Arena. Then silence.